Today, I thought it would be interesting and important to review Bill Gates on Australia 9 News and the portion where they ask about Epstein and his relationship to Epstein, as well as what was purported in the emails that Epstein had that had just come out in the last 24 to 48 hours, at least as of February 4th. Now, we know that Bill has talked about this topic a lot more in other interviews, but I think given the heat of the situation, this news station to get him on probably had to do some give and take, make some compromises. So they're not able to make any interrogative statements or accusations, but they are able to ask him briefly what happened. While the majority of the interview, both before and after, covers other topics, this was likely the news station's thought was, hey, we'll ask about all this other stuff. We'll talk about what he wants to talk about, but we'll get a little snippet, a little clip that we can profit off of and have all over the internet where he talks about Epstein, because we know that's what people really want to see. Now, I'm going to be watching this in real time with you for the first time. I think it's really helpful to watch somebody who is a master body language trainer and does have some certifications and also went to school for this kind of thing, break it down so you can see how I'm observing it on first watch. I have watched like maybe a few seconds into it before I was like, oh, let me pause here and record this video. But I did go ahead and do the due diligence of baselining Bill based on this interview and all the topics they discussed prior, which is also a good strategy if you are going to interrogate somebody or you do want truthful answers, so you have some semblance of what their baseline behaviors are and you put them at comfort so you can really watch that shift and change when they're under pressure. I stopped it here on this frame because I found this frame so interesting, and we're going to talk a lot about this here, but I wanted to go over some of Bill's baseline that we noticed. I'll try to go through these fairly quickly. You'll notice when he showed from the rear, he's got this interesting head tilt, which could look unnatural to some viewers, but it's because his legs are crossed at the knee. When you cross and you lean into the arm of the chair, your head's going to naturally fall over to that side, so there's no stress indication here. He also does wiggle his ankle as they're crossed. I don't think I'll be able to click over to that part, but I can see it in the thumbnail as I'm scrolling here. And I do know that his ankle wiggles, which is very common in older men and women. Also, for anybody who knows that they're being observed, when they're seated with their legs crossed, they'll tend to do that ankle motion for comfort and just to relieve some nervous energy. I don't think there's anything too weird going on here, especially because the topics that they're talking about I know to be truthful. He's talking about some of his philanthropy and giving to other countries as part of his promise to give away his wealth before he dies. Back in 2023, I got to work with the Illuminate Group, which was a group that was in part responsible for spending Bill's wealth, and I know obviously that he does do a lot of that stuff, so I can say, hey, this is truthful. With that said, I have no intention of protecting Bill. I've never met the guy. I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to look at this with biased eyes, but I just know that what we're talking about here is accurate, so he has no reason to be stressed. Wow, what a frame. You also see that Bill has a naturally high shoulder height. I think this is just due to the stooping of his head with age, something that we're not going to see any stress indicators from unless they go higher. He does, I find it interesting, gesture a lot with his hand below his eyebrow and above his jawline here. So he's doing a lot of motions here and keeping his palm and his fingers open. I also noticed that he raises his eyebrows a lot when he speaks. I think this is fairly typical for somebody who has to spend decades explaining complex topics to the population. You'll also know that more trustworthy seeming people and people who are more likable and softer, less of a domineering personality, they'll do a lot more of this. Actually, the best salespeople will do a lot of this eyebrow raising. And it's different than a request for approval, which if you know about body language, you'll know that you'll raise this as a request for approval. And we may or may not see Bill do this a little bit later. I also will say that Bill seems very much in his home turf here. He sits at rest with his hands clasped. His thumbs are displayed, which is good because we're not seeing any pollex reflection, which is a human reflex where our thumbs will retract when we're uncomfortable. So I'm going to be looking for that retraction. And I think with all that said, let's go in here and start watching from when he's asked about the Epstein files, which should be right around here. So we'll click into it and we'll wait for the interviewer to go ahead and ask him about these files. Let's watch.
To a lot of very rich people, and he was saying he could get them to give money to global health. You know, in retrospect,
we're a little ahead, so we'll start.
Role to government funding.
Yeah, part of that issue of trust brings me to Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know what your relationship with him was.
Yeah, I met Jeffrey in 2011. So over a period of 3 years, I had a number of dinners with him.
So one thing I'm going to clock here is this looking over to the right as a recall for information. So I'm not going to read into that, but I'm going to take note that it seems when he's recalling things from the distant past, he's kind of looking over there on the right. Again, this may not tell me anything, but if it seems to be misaligned later, then we can clock that. You'll also see as soon as Epstein's brought up, his chin has now lowered. So he's went from a position of talking like this to now his head is here. And I notice his head is not tilted as much this way anymore. He's sitting a bit more straight. So there's something important, and he wants to be believed here. And he's definitely less comfortable, I could already tell. Now he's bringing, instead of this eyebrow lifting we're seeing this glabella right here is tightening. So
focus was always, he knew a lot of very rich people, and he was saying
there's a very I'm not going to talk about the glasses touch because I don't think that that's irregular for Bill, but I do notice this look around of like this, I've been tricked. Does anybody believe me? I've been tricked. It's almost performative in nature when he goes, yeah, the conversation has always been, and he's like looking around like, guys, I was tricked. Like I was under these pretenses. And I do believe Bill here. I believe that Bill probably was approached by Epstein because Epstein's very sneaky, right? He probably did want to discuss things that were in Bill's interest to bring him into his world. So I think Bill probably does feel slighted in a way that he was brought into Epstein's world. What he did after that is of our interest. So let's keep going.
He could get them to give money to global health. In retrospect, that was a dead end, and I've said many times, but I'll say again, I was foolish to spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him.
There are a few things that I noticed here that we're going to watch back, and an interesting tip for you is when you're watching video back, don't slow it down, but speed it up. I bet you if we speed this up, we're seeing a lot more movement from Bill than we would have in the previous line of questioning. Something I notice is that when he's asked about, let's just play it because I'll point it out to you, but I want you to pay attention to where he's nodding versus where he's shaking his head. And also his shoulder shrug is very, very, very out of line here. I'd say that there is definitely some incongruence, meaning his words and his actions are not matching. And when they don't match, the body is what should be believed because they don't go through the same thought process filters that our words do. So let's click back and watch this.
And he was saying he could get them to give money to global health. In retrospect, that was a dead end, and I've said many times, but
so here we go. That was a dead end, which is fine. That's totally an appropriate place to shake your head.
I'll say again, I was foolish to spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing.
I was one of many people. Now, I actually think this is more of a head nod of like a circulation. So this is more of an illustrator. I was one of many people. So that's an illustrator there.
Knowing him.
You've no doubt seen the allegation.
Foolish
watch the shoulder shrug.
To spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him.
I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him. And there's that shoulder shrug. For me, what this indicates, just on my first watch here, I was one of the many people who regret ever knowing him. It could be that he is shrugging his shoulders in his saying that he knows him, maybe trying to deny that he really knows the man well. But I think it's more of just him shrugging very highly to show some discomfort around the fact that he's admitting that he knows him. I think this is him trying to protect himself in saying, I know Jeffrey Epstein. To me, that protection of these arteries here, trying to cover up some of your vulnerable points, is something his limbic system is doing that he's not aware of. So for me, that seems more of a blocking behavior there.
You've no doubt seen the allegations, including some of them from the last 24 to 48 hours. Are they true?
No,
a sharp inhale there. So he's preparing something, so he knows something's coming.
Apparently, Jeff.
Also, the slower blinks, his blink rate has slowed. So there's something he's not liking. And I'm going to say this is an intent cue that he's about to make a denial. So if I had to guess, he's going to be saying that something is either not true or that he doesn't believe something or that somebody lied. There's going to be some sort of denial coming. I've seen this 100 times, and I know that sharp inhale by that slower blink rate. And his voice pitch, it's very hard to tell, but his voice pitch is slightly higher here. I do find it interesting, however, while observing this, his rate of speech has not dramatically increased. Not from when he's talking about other topics he seems fairly passionate about.
Jeffrey wrote an email to himself.
A lot more of those, well, okay.
That email was never sent.
Right there. That is a lot of movement for Bill.
That's
a lot of movement for Bill.
No.
We know from the 6 C's, which are the most important C's in evaluating body language, that we want to look for clusters.
Well, apparently Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email...
Right there, the hand on the chest, the shoulder shrug, the eyebrows coming down, the lips pursing, the head. I mean, there's so much happening here that if I were to be investigating this, I would certainly be looking at this point and the claims in which he's making, that email was never sent to him. Now, I don't know if maybe he knew about the email, but I definitely know that he is showing some sort of discomfort in this denial. He also said, apparently he had an email. He's saying apparently to feign the fact that he didn't know about this. I imagine that Jeffrey could have been keeping this a secret from him. That's certainly possible. And maybe when this news came out, he didn't find out about it. But he's definitely letting it slip that this email is something that he didn't have knowledge about and was surprised by.
Was never sent. The email is...
That little laughter, that little nervous, that little tightening of the vocal cords there, the drying of the mouth, needing for him to have that little laugh, which actually is just serving as a voice clear and a dispelling of nervous energy. Also, just look at his face. Look at his resting face. So his resting face goes from like a polite smile in other areas of the interview, like this.
Hopefully, through the success of my...
Look at his facial expressions here versus
He had
money to global health. In retrospect, that was a dead end, and I've said many times, but I'll say again, I was foolish to spend time with him. I was one of many people who regret ever knowing him.
Which is okay for a topic like this to be brought up with something you're unhappy about, to look less pleased on this topic. But again, we're looking for those shifts, right? So we know that while he's not denying that he had a relationship with Epstein to some extent, there's a lot of discomfort that we're viewing here.
No doubt seen the allegations, including some of them from the last 24 to 48 hours. Are they true?
No, apparently Jeffrey wrote an email to himself.
Also, he said well, apparently, he didn't want to say the email, which would inadvertently show some supposition, like we would make a supposition that there's guilty knowledge. So he walks it back to say, apparently.
Email was never sent. The email is, false.
The email is, false. I think that he feels nervous. I think that that's the denial that we were waiting for. I think he feels nervous about lying about something. I think that there is truth in the email about Melinda and him asking Jeffrey where he can get some sort of STD test for Melinda. Maybe Jeffrey had scared him and said that one of the girls wasn't clean, and then he had to get Bill to email this stuff. So maybe he fabricated that story about getting an STD and then freaking Bill out, who's typically a pretty stand-up guy as far as we know until we found out about this Epstein stuff. He definitely has a strong moral compass, and I think that he's uncomfortable with the fact that he's denying this here. There's a lot of preparation involved in that stalling before he makes that by saying,
so I don't know what his thinking was there. Was he trying to...
He said, I don't know what his thinking was there, and he's...
It's never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what he's thinking.
Okay, he's nodding his head. Actually, it's interesting because I stopped myself from saying, I was like, yeah, if he's shaking his head, then that's totally aligned. So I stopped myself and had to watch that back because I'm like, that's actually not interesting. But now that I'm seeing this again, he's nodding his head and he goes, and I don't know what he's thinking there. He's nodding his head. He knows exactly what Jeffrey Epstein was thinking there. Those are prominent nods. The body is saying, I do know what his thinking was in this.
Was there, was he trying to...
Also, he does this look for approval. This lean in. I don't know what his thinking was there, and he's kind of leaning in to look to see, does anything shift on the interviewer that means that he's not believing him? That's very common for somebody who just got away with a lie. He feels he got away with it, and he has to just check, and then he can continue. Also, look at this. His hand is no longer clasped in his other hand. His hand is doing what we would call fig leafing, which is a polite way to say protecting your groin. On the deception scale here, on the behavioral table of elements that we use, that's 4 points towards deception. You want to look for any behaviors where if you add up the cluster of behaviors you view, they count towards 11 points or more. I'd say we're far and away above that at this point, especially with groin protection being such a common sign of deception. I think there's something that Bill's not telling us that he doesn't want us to know.
Me in some way, but
also look at that tapping on his leg, the hand moving. He's not gesturing it up here. He's doing that only for him, not for conversational purposes, not to illustrate. He's purely comforting himself. And the fact that he's touching himself more on the inner thigh there, which is to stimulate those nerves for comfort, really is telling us a lot.
It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him,
a lot of, a lot of stuttering there. A bit of what we would say is like a loss of fluency.
Brett and I, apologize that I did.
And I apologize. I don't know really why he would nod there, and I apologize. It could be that he's just disapproving of the fact that he's required to make these apologies. He's probably had to justify this to himself for a long time. Right? He's probably had to tell himself why what he's doing is okay and convince somebody of himself that, hey, this is moral and I'm totally allowed to do these things. But he also doesn't say who he's apologizing to. And that makes it seem fairly insincere to me. I do think he's truthful about saying he regrets it. But I don't think he's being truthful about his apology.
Did that.
The problem is some of the things that he has sent and some of the information about other people that has come up in those files has been true. Why would he do this and say this about you, do you think?
It's factually true.
When he does, that's a disapproval, by the way. He doesn't like that question. He doesn't like what that insinuates.
Has come up in those files has been true. Why would he do this and say this about you, do you think?
Right there, if you saw that pulling downward of the lips. What I find fascinating is it goes away quickly, meaning he didn't intentionally mean to leak that. If you're showing disapproval that prominently on your face, don't you think that you should display disapproval in how you answer the question? He should be perhaps upset or angry in what this person is implying. He doesn't want to stir the pot because there may be some guilt here. So I'm surprised to not see Bill pushing back and just answering these so willingly, trying to be honest and open while his emotions show that he's not liking what's going on. So he's kind of feigning his complicity here.
It's factually true that I was only at...
It's factually true that I was only at...
dinners. I never went to the island. I never met any women. And so...
Also by saying it's factually true. He doesn't need to say that. If you say it's true, it's implied, it's factual, especially when it's coming from you, which is the source. You're the first-hand account here. So that could mean that there's been some review of what he can and can't get away with, and he probably feels very confident he can get away with saying that, and so he's putting more emphasis on the fact that that's a true statement.
The more that comes out, the more clear it'll be that although the time was a mistake, it had nothing.
He rushed over. The more that comes out, the more clear it will be. He rushed over that, so he doesn't want more to come out.
Nothing to do with that kind of behavior.
Is it frustrating to you, given what you've said, that this is now happening?
Not really. I mean, people should...
I know we're not here to look at the interviewer, but he accidentally showed a little disgust, which is quite funny. He did the stereotypical microexpression of disgust.
Hold people who are successful to a very high bar. And so...
There's a lot less eye contact being made right now. So maybe his limbic system picked up on the disapproval from the interviewer and he's feeling less connected to him at this point. Or perhaps he feels uncomfortable making eye contact for the fear of being caught.
It's as these documents come out, they're going to be closely scrutinized.
Okay. Some of your work here in...
He's also, you can't see it because they're not showing his face, but on that side angle just a second ago, his lips are very tightly compressed, meaning he's withholding information.
People are successful to a very high bar. And so, it's, as these documents come out, they're going to be closely scrutinized.
Okay.
Right there, you can see that his lips are pulled together, so that's a withholding of information. My guess would be, just from my experience in this, is that he doesn't want to have to say more than he has to on the topic. He's uncomfortable approaching it, and I don't think he's liking this conversation. And so as soon as the interview starts talking, or the interviewer, he's kind of doing a, oh, shut up, Bill. Like, just let him ask. You got through it. Don't keep talking about it. Whereas an honest person would probably want to, in some degree, say more about their innocence, especially when you have a chance to prove it. He didn't do very much to prove his innocence. He didn't do very much to make us feel that he didn't do that. He didn't do anything to say, like, look, these are his intentions. He just denied.
Some of your work here in Australia has involved institutions like Doherty. Part of our contribution, be it to some of the viruses that have been ended, mRNA vaccines, has been in research. What can Australia do that...
So right there, I think that he knows that his ability to ask about the Epstein emails is over, right? They were lucky enough to get Bill Gates on the show. They got what they needed, and either the producer was signaling to him like, hey, move on to the next one, or they kind of hit their allotted time in which they're allowed to ask about it, or their set amount of questions. So they don't want to upset Bill. They don't want to lose him being on the show, and so now they're going back into asking about research and science and tech. And of course, they're not going to end on the Epstein thing. They're going to want to end on all this stuff there. So that's a pretty good review of what we're seeing here. Now, I don't know that Bill is being truthful. It doesn't seem he's being truthful entirely. There's definitely omitting of details, and there's also something that I feel he's very uncomfortable with in that topic, which I would say that if there is a total and complete truth that he didn't do anything wrong, that there is nothing that he's worried about, that he shouldn't be showing that much stress cues. It shouldn't be affecting him that much, and he should be excited about being able to vindicate himself, especially if it's turning his life upside down. And it didn't seem like he seized any of that opportunity properly. So for me, I'm going to say this isn't looking too good for Bill. We have what we need through the Epstein files, but what do you think? How do you think this is looking for Bill? What are the signs that maybe I missed? I actually spotted a lot more, but I don't want to keep on going over it and pausing and rewinding. So mention some of the ones that I've missed, and maybe I haven't seen them. And also, how do you guys think that this fares in the world for Bill? Is this affecting his family, his work life? Should he be punished for this? Let me know. I'd love to have a conversation about it, and I'm glad I got to watch this with you and break this down.